5 cities, 5 sons, 1 empire. This is the epic story of how a single family built the most powerful financial network, a financial network so vast, so deeply embedded in the global economy that its terrifying impact on the dollar, euro, and pound circulating today is still felt. The Rothschilds didn't just build a banking empire, they also created the financial system of the modern age. And the interesting, surprising, and funny part is that they achieved this empire in a tiny ghetto in Frankfurt, simply through their ability to see what others couldn't and their immense ambition. Before continuing, if you subscribe to our channel and like the video, you will be helping us tremendously, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on the story in the comments section. You've probably heard the conspiracy theories, the wild claims about world domination, but the real story is far more fascinating than any fiction, because what the Rothschilds actually... Nathan sends a coded message to Salomon in Vienna. Salomon pays your supplier. The gold never moves, but the value does. It's faster, safer, and the Rothschilds take a commission on every transaction. But their real breakthrough comes during the Napoleonic Wars. War is expensive. Governments need loans. Armies need supplies. Information becomes more valuable than gold. The Rothschilds are perfectly positioned. They're already handling Prince William's fortune, which has grown enormous from mercenary contracts. When Napoleon invades, Prince William flees, but his money stays with the Rothschilds. They use it as capital, lending to both sides of the conflict. Nathan in London is particularly aggressive. He doesn't just lend money. He speculates on the outcome of battles. He corners markets in gold and government bonds. He has agents at every major port, every battlefield, sending him information before anyone else gets it. The British government starts relying on him to transfer money to their allies, to pay their armies in the field. Nathan Rothschild becomes the unofficial banker of the British Empire. Which brings us back to Waterloo, June 18th, 1815. Napoleon has escaped from Elba. He's raised another army. If he wins at Waterloo, French bonds will soar and British bonds will crash. If he loses, the opposite happens. Fortunes will be made and lost, based on who gets the news first. Nathan has a courier stationed at the battlefield. As soon as the battle ends, the courier races to the coast. A special boat is waiting, paid to sail regardless of weather. The courier reaches Nathan in London a full day before the official government messenger. Nathan knows Napoleon has lost. He knows British bonds are about to soar. But instead of buying, he does something brilliant, something ruthless. He goes to the stock exchange and starts selling everything. Other traders watch in horror. Nathan Rothschild, the man with the best information network in Europe, is dumping British bonds. They assume he knows something they don't. Napoleon must have won. Panic selling begins. Bonds crash. The market collapses. Then, at the perfect moment, when prices hit rock bottom, Nathan gives a signal. His agents, strategically placed around the exchange, start buying. They buy every bond they can find at a fraction of yesterday's price. Hours later, the official news arrives. Wellington has defeated Napoleon. British bonds soar. In a single day, Nathan Rothschild has made the equivalent of billions in today's money. More importantly, he now owns a massive stake in the British government's debt. The Rothschilds effectively own the British economy. But Nathan isn't satisfied with just being rich. He uses his newfound power to transform the entire financial system. He pioneers the bond market as we know it. Instead of governments negotiating loans with individual bankers, Nathan creates something new. He issues bonds that can be bought and sold like stocks. Governments get their money up front. Investors get a tradable asset. The Rothschilds get a commission on every transaction. It's the birth of the modern capital market. The brothers replicate this model across Europe. Salomon finances the Austrian Empire's recovery from the Napoleonic Wars. James funds the Industrial Revolution in France, building the country's railway network. Karl bankrolls the unification of Italy. They don't just lend to governments. They decide which governments are creditworthy. A Rothschild rejection can crash a country's economy. Their approval can save it. By 1820, the Rothschilds are the richest family in the world. But they're also something more. They're the world's central bank. There's no Federal Reserve, no European central bank. There's just the Rothschilds, coordinating the flow of capital across continents. They standardize currencies. They stabilize exchange rates. They prevent bank runs by moving gold reserves where they're needed. They're performing all the functions of modern central banking, but they're doing it as a private family business. This gives them unprecedented power. When there's a revolution in France in 1830, it's James Rothschild who decides whether the new government can borrow money. When there's a banking crisis in England in 1825, it's Nathan who provides the gold to stop the panic. When Austria needs to suppress a rebellion in Italy, it's Salomon who finances the army. The Rothschilds aren't just bankers, they're kingmakers. But power like this creates enemies. Across Europe, resentment builds. How can one family, and a Jewish family at that, hold such sway over Christian nations? Anti-Semitic pamphlets proliferate, spinning wild theories about Rothschild plots for world domination. The family becomes a lightning rod for every conspiracy theory, every economic anxiety, every nationalist resentment. The Rothschilds respond not by hiding, but by becoming even more visible. They build palaces that overshadow royal residences. They collect art that rivals national museums. They throw parties that make royal weddings look modest. It's a calculated display. If you're going to be hated for your power, you might as well be respected for it too. By 1850, the Rothschilds control more wealth than most nations. Their banks hold the debt of governments from London to Vienna, Paris to Naples. But controlling government debt is just the beginning. What comes next will transform them from mere bankers into the architects of the global economy. They're about to build something that no one has attempted before. A worldwide financial web with themselves at the center, controlling the flow of gold, information, and power across every continent. The California gold rush of 1849 changes everything. Suddenly, massive amounts of gold are flowing into the global economy. Most banks see chaos. The Rothschilds see opportunity. They establish agencies in San Francisco, buying gold directly from miners and shipping it to their banks in London and Paris. But they don't just trade gold, they control its price. When they buy, prices rise. When they sell, prices fall. Governments realize that the Rothschilds can crash their currencies with a single decision. This power becomes clear during the American Civil War. Both the Union and the Confederacy desperately need European support. The Confederacy wants recognition and loans. The Union wants Europe to stay neutral. Both sides court the Rothschilds. The family's decision will literally determine the outcome of the war. They choose the Union, not out of moral conviction about slavery, but because they judge it the better credit risk. Without Rothschild support, the Confederacy can't raise money in European markets. The South's economy collapses. The Rothschilds have effectively decided the fate of America without firing a single shot. But their real masterstroke comes in 1868. Japan has just emerged from centuries of isolation. The Meiji government needs to modernize fast. They need railways, telegraphs, modern weapons. Most importantly, they need money. The Rothschilds see what others miss. Japan is about to become a major power. They arrange Japan's first foreign loan, £7 million. It's the beginning of Japan's transformation into an industrial powerhouse. The Rothschilds don't just profit from the loan. They become Japan's gateway to Western finance, taking commissions on every subsequent deal. Meanwhile, in Europe, They're pioneering something that seems mundane, but is actually revolutionary. They're standardizing money. Before the Rothschilds, every bank issues its own notes. Every country has multiple currencies. Exchange rates fluctuate wildly. Commerce is chaos. The Rothschilds use their influence to push for standardization. They lobby for the gold standard, where every currency is backed by gold at a fixed rate. Why? Because they control the gold. With standardized currencies, they can move money anywhere instantly. They've essentially created the first global currency system, with themselves as the central hub. This system reaches its peak with the Suez Canal. Ferdinand de Lesseps needs massive funding to dig a channel through Egypt. The Rothschilds arrange the financing, but they structure it brilliantly. They don't just lend money, they create a complex web of bonds, shares, and guarantees that gives them control without ownership. When Egypt can't pay its debts in 1875, the British government needs to buy Egypt's shares in the canal to secure the route to India. The government needs £4 million immediately. Parliament isn't in session. The Prime Minister, Disraeli, sends his secretary to Nathan's son, Lionel Rothschild, with a simple question. Can you lend us £4 million? Lionel doesn't even look up from his lunch. Yes. The British Empire's most strategic asset is secured with Rothschild money, but the family's power extends far beyond government loans. They're quietly taking control of the world's resources. They finance the diamond mines of South Africa, partnering with Cecil Rhodes to create De Beers. They fund the copper mines of Spain, the mercury mines of Italy, the oil fields of Russia. They don't want to own these resources directly, too visible, too risky. Instead, they control the financing. Every mine, every well, every railway needs capital. And capital means the Rothschilds. Their most audacious move comes in the 1880s. They see that Russia, despite its vast resources, is economically backwards. The Tsar needs to modernize but doesn't trust Western banks. The Rothschilds make him an offer he can't refuse. They'll finance Russia's entire railway network, connecting Moscow to the Pacific. In exchange, they get exclusive rights to finance all Russian government loans. For the next 30 years, every ruble that Russia borrows passes through Rothschild hands. This creates an extraordinary situation. The Rothschilds are simultaneously financing the British Empire, the French Republic, the Austrian Empire, and Tsarist Russia. Countries that are political rivals, even potential enemies, are all dependent on the same family for credit. The Rothschilds become the ultimate peace brokers. Wars are bad for business, especially when you're financing both sides. They use their leverage to prevent conflicts, to force negotiations, to maintain the balance of power. Some call them the peace bank. Others see something more sinister, a shadow government that controls nations through debt. The family's influence reaches into every aspect of society. They finance the construction of railways across Europe, determining which cities prosper and which wither. They fund the development of the wine industry in France, even buying Chateau Lafite and Chateau Mouton. They're patrons of the arts, their collections rivaling those of royalty. They even influence science, funding research expeditions and archaeological digs. There's hardly an aspect of 19th century life that the Rothschilds don't touch, but maintaining this empire requires absolute family loyalty. The Rothschilds have strict rules. They marry within the family, cousins to cousins, keeping the fortune concentrated. They never take outside partners. They never go public. Every major decision requires consensus among the 5 branches. Information is shared constantly, but never with outsiders. They develop their own intelligence network, with agents in every major city, reporting on everything from political gossip to harvest yields. This secrecy breeds suspicion. In 1890, a French journalist publishes La France Juive, blaming the Rothschilds for every problem in French society. The book sells millions of copies. Similar pamphlets appear across Europe. The Rothschilds are accused of causing wars, manipulating elections, even controlling the weather. The family's response is revealing. They don't deny their power. They simply point out that their interests align with stability and prosperity. An unstable Europe is bad for business. The truth is both less and more dramatic than the conspiracies suggest. The Rothschilds don't control everything. They can't prevent the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914. They can't stop the march toward World War I. But they do control something perhaps more important: the financial infrastructure that makes the modern world possible. Every international transaction, every government bond, every major industrial project relies on systems the Rothschilds created. Consider what happens in 1907. A banking panic starts in New York. Banks are failing. The stock market is crashing. The panic spreads to London, then Paris, then Berlin. The entire global financial system is on the verge of collapse. There's no central bank to intervene, no government bailout. But there are the Rothschilds. Working from their offices in 5 capitals, coordinating by telegraph, they orchestrate a private rescue. They move gold reserves between countries. They guarantee failing banks. They restore confidence. The panic ends. The system survives. Few people realize that the global economy has just been saved by a single family. This crisis leads to a crucial realization. Governments decide they need their own central banks, institutions that can do what the Rothschilds do but under public control. The Federal Reserve is created in 1913. The Bank of International Settlements follows in 1930. These institutions are explicitly designed to replace the Rothschilds' role as the world's financial coordinator. But here's the twist. The Rothschilds are instrumental in creating these very institutions. They help design their structure, their policies, their procedures. Why would they create their own replacement? Because they understand that their visible power has become a liability. Better to step back into the shadows, to influence rather than control. By 1914, on the eve of World War I, the Rothschild Empire reaches its zenith. The 5 houses together control assets worth over $6 billion, more than the entire wealth of the United States. They own palaces in every major city. They have titles of nobility in 5 countries. Nathan's son is the first Jewish member of the British House of Lords. James's son is the most powerful banker in France. The family that started in the Frankfurt ghetto now moves in the highest circles of European society. But they also sense change coming. Nationalism is rising. Anti-Semitism is growing more virulent. New technologies like the telephone and radio are breaking their monopoly on fast communication. American banks are growing powerful, less dependent on European capital. The Rothschilds begin to adapt, to evolve. They start shifting from government loans to private industry. They invest in mining companies, oil companies, pharmaceutical companies. They create venture capital firms before the term exists. They're not retreating, they're transforming. World War I changes everything. In just 4 years, the world the Rothschilds built comes crashing down. The Austrian Empire collapses. The Russian Empire falls to revolution. The Ottoman Empire disintegrates. 3 of the 5 Rothschild houses lose their power base overnight. The family's carefully constructed network, built over a century, is torn apart. But here's what's remarkable. The Rothschilds don't disappear. They evolve. They transform from visible puppet masters into invisible architects. And in doing so, they become more powerful than ever. The war costs the family dearly. The Vienna house, run by Salomon's descendants, sees its assets seized. The Frankfurt house, the original home, is forced to close. The Naples house has already withdrawn from business. Only London and Paris survive intact. But these 2 houses hold something invaluable: relationships with the emerging American financial elite. While Europe tears itself apart, the Rothschilds are quietly building bridges to the new power across the Atlantic. They partner with J.P. Morgan, who's been their American agent since the 1870s. They work with the Warburgs, the Schiffs, the Lehmans. These aren't competitors, they're protégés. The Rothschilds taught them how to structure bonds, how to finance governments, how to control without owning. Now, as American banks rise to dominate global finance, they carry Rothschild DNA in their operations. The student has become the teacher, but the original teacher still holds significant influence. The 1920s bring a new challenge: democracy. More countries have elected governments. Public opinion matters. The old model of backroom deals with princes and emperors doesn't work anymore. The Rothschilds adapt again. They stop seeking publicity. No more grand palaces. No more ostentatious parties. They begin operating through shell companies, holding companies, investment trusts. The family name disappears from public view, but their capital doesn't. Consider what happens in 1929. The stock market crashes. Banks fail worldwide. The Great Depression begins. Most wealthy families are destroyed. But the Rothschilds, having learned from centuries of booms and busts, have already moved their wealth. They've shifted from stocks to gold, from gold to land, from land to art. They don't try to time the market. They transcend it. When everyone else is selling in panic, they're quietly buying assets at depression prices. But their masterstroke comes in the 1930s. As fascism rises in Europe, the Rothschilds face an existential threat. Hitler names them explicitly as enemies of the Reich. Mussolini seizes their Italian assets. The family faces not just financial ruin, but physical annihilation. Their response reveals the true extent of their power. Years before the war starts, they begin moving assets offshore. Not just money, but entire companies. They create complex ownership structures spanning multiple jurisdictions. A company registered in Switzerland, owned by a trust in Liechtenstein, controlled by a foundation in Luxembourg, managed by a bank in London. Even if government seize one piece, the rest survives. When World War II erupts, the Austrian Rothschilds are arrested. Their palace is looted. Their art collection is stolen. But the family has prepared. They've already moved the real wealth. What the Nazis seize are shells, facades. The true assets are hidden in a web so complex that even today historians can't fully trace them. The family pays a ransom of $21 million to secure the release of Louis von Rothschild. It seems like surrender, but that ransom is paid from accounts the Nazis didn't even know existed. After the war, something extraordinary happens. The Rothschilds could seek revenge, reclaim their seized assets, rebuild their visible empire. Instead, they do the opposite. They deliberately shrink their public profile. They close the grand banks. They sell the famous palaces. They donate the art collections to museums. To the outside world, it looks like decline. The great Rothschild empire seems to be fading. But this is an illusion. They're not retreating. They're evolving into something new, the invisible hand of global finance. They create N.M. Rothschild and Sons as a merchant bank, not a commercial bank. They don't want deposits from ordinary people. They don't want to be regulated like regular banks. They want to be advisors, intermediaries, the power behind the throne. When governments need to privatize industries, Rothschild advises them. When corporations need to merge, Rothschild structures the deal. When new markets emerge, Rothschild is already there, setting the rules. The 1960s bring the euro-dollar market, dollars held outside America, beyond U.S. regulation. The Rothschilds are instrumental in creating this market. They help establish Luxembourg as a financial center, a place where money can move without scrutiny. They pioneer offshore banking in the Caribbean. They create the legal structures that allow wealth to flow invisibly around the world. They're not breaking laws. They're writing them. In 1981, the French government nationalizes banks, including the Rothschild Bank in Paris. It seems like the end of the French house. But within a year, David de Rothschild creates a new bank. Different name, same connections. The family loses nothing except visibility. This becomes their pattern. When governments regulate, they adapt. When laws change, they evolve. They're like water, finding every crack, every loophole, every opportunity. The 1980s bring financial deregulation. The Rothschilds are ready. They've been preparing for decades. As governments privatize state industries, Rothschild advises on almost every major deal. British Telecom, British Gas, British Steel. The family that once financed governments now helps governments sell themselves to private investors. They earn hundreds of millions in fees. But more importantly, they shape the new economy. Look at their role in the gold market. The London gold fixing, where the global price of gold is set, happens in the Rothschild offices from 1919 to 2004. 5 banks meet twice daily to determine the price. Rothschild chairs every meeting for 85 years. They don't control the price, but they see every trade, know every trend, understand every movement before anyone else. When they finally leave the gold market in 2004, it's not retreat. Gold has become transparent, electronic, regulated. The advantage is gone. They move to new opportunities. Today, the Rothschild empire is more powerful than ever, just less visible. Rothschild & Company operates in 40 countries. They advise on the largest mergers and acquisitions. They manage wealth for billionaires and governments. They structure deals that reshape entire industries. But you won't see their name in headlines. They work through subsidiaries, partnerships, joint ventures. The family fortune, estimated at anywhere from $400 billion to $500 trillion, depending on how you count, is spread across thousands of entities. Consider their recent moves. They advised on the privatization of state assets in Russia, China, and India. They structured the refinancing of Greece's debt during the European crisis. They're advisors to central banks, including the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank. The institutions supposedly created to replace them now hire them as consultants. The irony is delicious. The Rothschilds have become the advisors to their own successors, but their real power lies in something intangible: information and relationships. Every major financial player has some connection to the Rothschilds. Every significant deal involves someone they know. They've created a network effect. The more connected they are, the more valuable they become. The more valuable they become, the more connected they get. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that's been building for 250 years. Modern conspiracy theorists still obsess over the Rothschilds. They see them behind every crisis, every war, every economic manipulation. The truth is more subtle. The Rothschilds don't need to manipulate. They've built the system. They've created the rules. They've established the networks. They profit whether markets rise or fall, whether peace or war prevails. They're not controlling the game. They are the game. Think about what they've actually accomplished. They created international banking. They standardized currency exchange. They invented government bonds as we know them. They pioneered central banking. They developed offshore finance. They structured the privatization of public assets. Every aspect of modern finance bears their fingerprint. You can't escape their influence because they helped build the cage we all live in. The family today is led by the 7th generation. They're educated at the finest schools, work at the most prestigious firms, marry into the most powerful families. But they maintain the original principles. Family first, information is power, patience beats aggression. They don't seek publicity. They don't flaunt wealth. They've learned that true power is invisible power. What's their secret? How has one family maintained influence for over 2 centuries? The answer is adaptation. The Rothschilds don't fight change. They anticipate it. They don't resist regulation. They shape it. They don't fear technology. They embrace it. Every disruption that should destroy them only makes them stronger. Because they understand something fundamental. Money is just a tool. The real currency is trust, information, and relationships. And in those currencies, the Rothschilds remain the richest family on earth. As we move into the age of cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, and digital finance, the Rothschilds are already there. They're investing in blockchain companies. They're advising on digital currency regulations. They're structuring the deals that will define the next economy. The tools change, but the game remains the same. And the Rothschilds, after 250 years, are still the masters of the game. The conspiracy theorists are wrong about the details, but right about the conclusion. The Rothschilds do have extraordinary power. They don't control everything, but they influence everything. They're not the puppet masters, but they built the stage. They wrote the script. They trained the actors. And they still collect royalties on every performance. The Rothschild empire never fell. It just became invisible. And in becoming invisible, it became invincible.